Yo, what's up everybody? It's me, WDMichael, and in today's YouTube video, we are going to be going over the third episode of WD Learns VGC in the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet video game. And I'm super stoked. This series has been a ton of fun to play. I've played a bunch of teams, and I've been having just an absolute blast. The last video we ended up doing was a Lycanroc and a T-Tar team that we rented from a previous tournament that did really well. Played it, enjoyed it, did really well on the ranked ladder. And then I found that there were some things that were on the team that weren't really that consistent, specifically on the ranked ladder. And there were two Pokemon in particular that I really wanted to change. And that was the Annihilate, as well as the Rotom Heat. I feel like there might be some better options right now with the meta changing that could fit on the team better. And so that's what I did. I actually made a couple of changes to the previous team. So in this video, we're gonna be talking about the team that I made and that I've been playing with the last couple weeks and took to number 9 on the Master Ball tier ranked ladder. So let's hop into the video and check out this team, yo. Hey, here we are with the team, and so here's the actual Pokepaste for this team. I'll have a link down below in the description of the video so you can grab the Pokepaste, check out the actual stats, and make this team for yourself, do any changes you may need. But for me, the original team had the Tyranitar and Lycanroc combo. It also had the Dondozo and Tatsugiri combo. And in the middle of the team, we had a Annihilate and a Rotom. They had their purposes, but I feel like with the meta changing, differences in the meta, and just the way that these Pokemon had worked previously just wasn't working as well or as consistently. I wasn't bringing them as much. So I wanted to find some Pokemon that would fit on this team that would give me some other options, because I felt like, to be honest, with the last team, I feel like I was constantly taking Tyranitar, Lycanroc, and Dondozo and Tatsugiri, and I really wasn't bringing any other options. And I needed another combo that I could bring when I maybe necessarily didn't want to bring Dondozo, because what ended up happening was I found that there were a lot of counters to Dondozo popping up. You have Meowscarada, you have Amoonguss, you have Torkoal, you have all these stat ability changes like Murkrow. There were a ton of them. Dondozo had counters. I needed to find a way to bring on some other Pokemon that countered the Dondozo counter and gave me an out and didn't necessarily give me a free loss every single time they brought a massive team with all these counters. And so that's where we ended up starting off with these two. And we will let's start with the Houndstone, because the Houndstone was one of the first picks that I decided I really wanted to play with, just due to the fact that it has Sand Rush. And so now with this, we actually have a second user for Sand Rush, and there's not a whole lot of weather in the meta. You've got rain, you have sand, and you have sun. And for the most part, we're not seeing a lot of them. I mean, they're happening, but they're easy to fix now. There's no Dynamax moves where we're constantly getting different weather changes almost every turn. It's more or less that you have to switch your Pokemon in to get those weather changes. So I found that the weather advantages have been a lot more usable in this series. So having Houndstone with Sand Rush has just been super awesome, because this team now, if I don't bring the Dondozo, I don't necessarily have a Tailwind, but two of my Pokemon have Sand Rush and we have Sand Up. I don't necessarily need Tailwind a lot of the time. So it gives me a really nice speed advantage, especially for my end game when maybe I've lost the Tyranitar and the Lycanroc and I'm now down to one of my last Pokemon. This Houndstone can really help me clean up a lot of matches, and I'll kind of go over why it does that. The biggest reason that it is able to do that, especially at the end of the game, is because of Last Respects. Last Respects is a super strong move that ends up basically giving you an extra 50 power for every time you lose another one of your party members. So if you bring this Pokemon in at the end after you've lost your Tyranitar, your Lycanroc, you're going to be doing 150 damage just with stab, and if you still have Sand Up, with some speed advantage. It's a really nice way to clean up a lot of these moves, and it actually helped with a lot of the meta Pokemon, specifically because we're seeing, you know, some Goldangos, we're seeing a lot of Annihilates, and really there's a lot of Pokemon that this actually ends up doing a lot of work into, and there's not a lot of normal Pokemon where I'm running the risk of not being able to do this damage. For the most part, a lot of the normal Pokemon are actually just Terra ghosting, like Mousehold, where they just Terra into a ghost Pokemon. So for the most part, I found this Houndstone's been really useful, and it's consistently gave me a lot of advantages in my matches. Now with some of the other moves that are on this Houndstone that actually really round it out and help out a lot, Play Rough gives you an advantage in some of those Pokemon that are really good into Houndstone. That's, you've got Meowscarada, you've got other fighting Pokemon and stuff like that. So the Play Rough is just a really nice, solid ability. It gives you a fairy move coverage that the team didn't have before. Great move. It ends up working when it actually hits. Unfortunately, Play Rough misses from time to time, and it can be super frustrating, especially when it's your last Pokemon and you're really depending on that. Last Respects, like we said, massive move. It does all the damage basically for this Pokemon, and it is the reason why we really bring it. It is really good, and it will get some massive KOs. Shadow Sneak has been one of those other ones that's been super helpful. there are times where you're maybe just not fast enough, maybe sand fell down and there's just one Pokemon you need to KO and they're in that range. Shadow Sneak helps out. It's helped out in a ton of games. It's a huge play. It gets stabbed. It does a decent amount of damage. And then the last one, and I feel like this one, honestly, for this Pokemon has helped out tremendously. And the reason is because there's a lot of Sucker Punches out there right now, and Sucker Punches don't really work super well with Houndstone. Sucker Punch will absolutely dumpster a Houndstone in a hot minute, especially when it comes from a King Gambit or something along those lines. It ends up being an issue. So being able to substitute and necessarily get yourself a shield when they're gonna Sucker Punch you negates Sucker Punch damage, and also gives you an extra turn where basically now you've got a buffer zone in between you and that Pokemon for another turn or two, and it will save you. So using substitute at those right moments is one of those, it makes this Pokemon actually usable. Otherwise it would be really hard in this meta to use this Pokemon because of all the Sucker Punches. It is an issue. So definitely use that when you have the opportunity, because it will save your life. The other Pokemon that I wanted to put on this team, just due to the fact that it's done really well in the meta and it provides a lot of coverage that we needed for this team, was Hydreigon. Hydreigon with a Choice Scarf ends up being this really quick attacker that can kind of do some things really quick for us, change out if I need to, but just overall it really covers and it kind of fits into a slot that we really needed. That was fire coverage. That was kind of where the Rotom was removed out of this team, and if you can kind of tell, we kind of replaced the Annihilate and the Rotom with similar type coverage and coverages, because they did work as far as their coverage. I just feel like the Pokemon themselves just didn't work as well on the team and maybe in the meta at this point. So Hydreigon, we ended up having the Dark Pulse, which is fantastic, gives you huge stab, also gives you that chance for the flinch. As well as we've got Draco Meteor. Obviously in this meta there's a lot of dragon Pokemon. Draco Meteor does a ton of damage and can really help you out. The other one, this is the real, like, this was kind of where I wanted to bring the Hydreigon, and the reason why I wanted it was because of Heat Wave. Heat Wave is one of those moves that can really help with the Meowscarda, Goldango, and a bunch of other steel Pokemon that are kind of just out there, and it was helpful. In this one in particular, we chose to do a Fire Terra just because, you know, we've got Torkoals running around who are bringing in Drought, and we've got other Pokemon where, you know, sometimes the Fire Terra ended up just giving us that extra Heat Wave boost that we really needed, and being a Fire Terra helps us out anyways because we're not taking much damage from a lot of things in the meta. Recently I have noticed that there is starting to be a lot more rain teams. We've got Palafin, Pelipper, and they're starting to be a lot more prevalent. So if I were to now take this team at this moment in time and change some things, it might honestly be the Hydreigon Terra, specifically just because it is starting to become an issue right now in the meta. So that would be my one kind of thing with this team at the moment. U-turn is fantastic. We've got the Choice Scarf, so it gives you a really quick change out if you need to. One of the ways that I use this a lot is specifically from, like, if I'm going up against a Pelipper and I know they're going to bring out their weather first. A lot of times they do because they know that they're going to be slower than my T-Tar and they'll get the rain up. What I'll do is I'll end up bringing out my Lycanroc and my Hydreigon, and depending on how the matchup is and if I like it or if I don't like it, I can use this U-turn to bring in my Tyranitar, change the weather, and ultimately give my Lycanroc a boost. So it really actually meshed really well with the team. It ended up being one of those ones where it fit well, and it also provided us with a lot of coverage that we really needed. And then the other Pokemon are pretty much the exact same Pokemon from the previous team. We have the Flying Tyranitar with the Assault Vest, an absolute monster in the meta. I feel like this is probably one of my favorite Pokemon to play on this team. It consistently does super well into a lot of the Pokemon. There's not a lot of Pokemon that can do super effective damage into it. As it is a flying Pokemon, there are no real prevailing electric Pokemon that are doing a lot of work in the meta. There's also the fact that with all the ground moves, Earthquake from Garchomp, we're finding that being a flying Pokemon is actually super helpful in this meta. It's just, it does so well. And then you've got the Assault Vest. This Pokemon basically takes almost no damage from special attacking Pokemon, and being able to change to a flying type, you end up removing that issue with Sylveon and all the fairy typing. I can't say it enough. This Pokemon is really good in the meta. Flying Tyranitar is awesome. It has done crazy things. Assurance does really well into Goldangos, gives you another option into some of these psychic Pokemon like Armarouge and Indeedee. Rock Slide paired with your Lycanroc, it's Rock Slide. It does awesome. Terra Flying Blast is by far one of the best moves with this Pokemon. It absolutely dumpsters Meowscarda. It helps you with Amoonguss. It helps you with just, I mean, it just gives you a really nice move to be able to use, and it gives you a stab, especially when you Terra. And then Ice Punch. Ice Punch is amazing. It will one-shot Garchomps. It will do work into Murkrows. This moveset and this Pokemon just all together, fantastic. It works really well in the meta. It's still working to this day. I absolutely love it. I wouldn't change it at the moment for anything. This Lycanroc, also the same thing. It's absolutely fantastic when you start getting a feel for how to use it. Close Combat Rock Slide, great moves, and I'm giving you some really good coverage into the meta. Rock Slide, Sand Rush gets you some early game flinches that can just honestly give you matches for free on turn 1 if you get the right flinches. Great Pokemon. Endure and Endeavor, fantastic options for if you got to start really figuring out how the best way to get yourself down to 1 HP. Seeing in the opposing Pokemon when they have priority moves like Aqua Jet or anything that's going to go first, like a Sucker Punch, any of those kind of things, you got to pay attention to and understand when they're there. And being able to use your Endure to maybe outlive. Maybe there's a Sucker Punch user up on the field that's one shot, but you still have your Lycanroc. You can endure that Sucker Punch, not take the damage and kill the Sucker Punch, so that you can still use your Lycanroc's Endeavor on another turn. So being able to make sure you kind of understand when to use Endure and Endeavor can really help you in changing a match really, really quick. You're taking Pokemon with Endeavor from full health down to 1 HP, or enduring a Sucker Punch and killing that Pokemon when that's what they really want to do. So just kind of that vision and knowing what your opposing opponent is gonna do can really like, and I think the biggest thing with this team and the reason why I've liked it so much compared to my other teams that when I was first starting learning VGC, a lot of them were really head heavy, just like rushing straight in, do as much damage quickly. There was no changing or swapping. This team to me has felt much more like Pokemon chess than any other team that I played. This swapping, the changing of Pokemon, covering damage, swapping for weather. This team is a lot of fun, and you really, it makes you think about switching. And it's made me, honestly, I feel like it's helped me be a better player. With Dynamax, there wasn't a whole lot of switching. And now with this kind of meta and the change in Dynamax with Terrestrialization, I've started getting a better feel for swapping Pokemon at certain times to cover with resistance, to cover with, you know, eliminating damage by bringing in a Ghost Pokemon with a fighting move, all these kind of things. And this team has really helped me with that. And I've loved this team. This team's been consistently keeping me in the top 500 on the ranked ladder. And yeah, it's just due to all these Pokemon and their weaknesses end up being supported by a lot of these other Pokemon. So T-Tar generally is going to get hit with a lot of fighting moves. Same with Lycanroc. You have a Houndstone who's really not going to take a lot of those fighting hits. Hydreigon, same thing. It may end up taking a lot of fighting hits, but you have a Houndstone to swap back and forth with, where you can really mess with your opponents and negate a lot of damage. The Flying T-Tar changes a lot of it because you end up getting a lot of misses from, you know, fighting moves. You're trying to kill your T-Tar. It is really, really cool. And then, as we all know, I'm sorry, it's at the end of the video, it's kind of the last two. We all know, if you've played VGC for 10 matches or more in this series, you know about Dondozo. It's that Pokemon that is just, it's stally, it does a lot of work, and if the opposing team doesn't really have a counter for it, it ends up getting a lot of wins. I won't lie. It's just a really good Pokemon, and it's hard not to put it on a team when it is as good as it is. With the regional event this last weekend in San Diego, we found that Dondozo is starting to see a lot less play. People are starting to figure out there's other team comps that can run, and you don't necessarily have to always have a counter for it. So does seem like we may start moving away from Dondozo. It seems like there are some other options popping up, and that is really nice. And the big one was Rain. That was a big one we saw in the regional event. So we'll start probably seeing a lot more Rain. Tauros was another big one, and maybe a little less Dondozo, because from what I can tell, there were a lot less Dondozos in the top cut than has been in a lot of the grassroots online tournaments recently, so that was pretty cool. But this one is I've enjoyed this Dondozo, and if there was one thing that I would change due to the current meta shifts, it would be that this Dondozo is a Terra type Steel. Right now in the meta, there is a good chance you're going to face another Dondozo with Fissure. A big change is that a lot of Dondozos are now being Flying Terra, just to cover the Fissure. And if I were to change this team at this moment in time, I would more than likely change the Terra type on this Dondozo to Flying to cover the current meta at this time. Other than that, Earthquake, Order Up, very great moves. They work really, really well. The two things that I found that work really well on the ladder and help me out with a lot of Dondozos matchups are Rest and Sleep Talk. I feel like I'm able to outlive a lot of these Dondozos. I end up generally have a little bit more recovery with Rest. I end up with Sleep Talk. I'm not necessarily super worried about Yawn or being put to sleep with Spore. I feel like this Dondozo has been really consistent. I enjoy it. It's been a really good one. It's definitely not one that I see a lot on the ladder, so I feel like I surprise a lot of people when I face them, especially when you do that rest. It is really hard when you get this Pokemon down to a one shot and then it goes right back to full HP. So big problem for a lot of people. Tatsugiri, this is the citrus berry Tatsugiri, so it is going to be a little bit bulkier. It lives a lot of things. It doesn't die right off the bat, so if you end up having it be one of your last Pokemon, it isn't the end of the world. You're not going to just always get one shot. So it's been really cool. It has actually saved me in quite a few matches just by itself. Yeah, it's great. It's solid. The only problem is that almost all of its moves have an accuracy issue, so you may miss from time to time. You just got to be aware of that. Draco Meter does massive damage. Icy Wind is great, gives you that speed reduction, is really good in a couple of the Pokemon in the meta. And then Muddy Water gives you that stab, massive just spread move, and is just really good. So yeah, this has been a fantastic team. I got this team up into consistently the top 500, top 100, and even at the start of Series 2, got it to rank 9. So it's been a fantastic team. I will actually post a rental for the actual team here above, so you can see that rental code, play it on the rank ladder yourself. But yeah, I'm curious, what do you guys think of this team? Are there changes that you would make to this team? Do you like this team? Do you hate this team? Yeah, just let me know what you think of it. I've had an absolute blast. If you end up playing with this team, let me know. I'd definitely be super curious about it, just because it's been a lot of fun. I haven't seen a lot of people use Houndstone yet, so if you end up using it and you like Houndstone, let me know. I'd love to hear in the comments. Yo, seriously, thank you all so much for coming out to my YouTube video. I do really appreciate it. If you like this kind of content and you want to continue seeing more of it, make sure you hit that like, that subscribe, and that notification bell so you get notified when I drop more videos just like this one, or some highlights from my Twitch channel. Again, thank you all so much. I hope you have a fantastic day. Enjoy your time in Paldea, and peace out, trainers. Woo!